Thank you, and welcome to the March 7th meeting of the Easthampton City Council. Could I have a roll call, please?
Justin Cobb.
Present.
Donald Sykowski.
Here.
Salem Derby. Dan Hagan.
Here.
Joseph McCoy. Chester Ogalevitz.
Present.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Joy Winnie.
Here.
Nathan Ziegler.
Present.
Do I have entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion on the table to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Any amendments? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes passed. Next, what I'd like to do, we have some time here, is head down to communications from elected officials. The Vice President, Mr. Keegan.
Why isn't there public speak time, sir, on the agenda?
I missed it, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That should be there after
Okay.
minutes.
Yes.
It's the clerk's fault.
Thank you for that correction. Councilor Rist, thank you for that correction.
You're welcome.
What we're gonna head into right now, before we head into communications from elected officials, is public speak time. This is where we allow people from the public to come up and address the council on any topic that's currently not on our public hearing agenda tonight. If there's any member in the audience who would like to come up and speak to us, please state your name and address, and we will sit here and listen to what you have to say. Seeing none, moving on to the next, which is communication from elected officials and board members. We do have a request from the retirement board. Let's see if I can find that real quick. We do have a request from the retirement board. It says, "Dear city council members, concerns a local option to increase the minimum allowance under general laws, chapter 32, section 12. I'll read this real quick. The Easthampton Community Retirement Board has taken the first step in the process of assessing these, and I'm going to paraphrase quite a bit. And basically, the Easthampton Retirement Board voted in the affirmative on February 27, 2012, to increase the minimum monthly allowance contained in Mass General Law, Chapter 32, from $250 to $500. And then they give some explanations for this, and that this benefit is for surviving members of spouses. And I'd like a motion to send this to finance for consideration review.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to send this to finance for review. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. I do have some correspondence from Councilor McCoy, who could not attend tonight, concerning an item that is on the public hearing agenda. Would it be appropriate to read it now since it's correspondence, or would it during the public hearing?
I would do it during the, I would present it, if you would, during the debate on it.
Okay, I will read that when we actually enter into the public hearing. And I also have received some correspondence from a member of the New City Neighborhood Association, which I haven't had an opportunity to read yet, but that we did receive that, and I hope everybody got a copy. And if not, I'll provide that so that we'll have it for review. That said, that's all I have. I'd like to move on to Mayor Communications. Mayor Tausnig? No report? While we have the mayor here, does anybody have any questions for the mayor? Seeing none, thank you very much. Reports of standing committees, rules and government relations, Councilor Rist.
Yes, Mr. President, I do have a report this evening. If the council should remember, we voted when this was sent to committee, to debate whether we should adopt an ethics rule. It would be a two-step process in which we would first debate it in committee as to whether we should actually adopt the rule, and second, and if the council should agree, should that be a positive recommendation, it would go back to committee, and the rule would actually be written and the language would be decided. We have decided after debate that we will recommend 3-0 to actually write a rule on ethics. We debated Robert's Rules of Order in our meeting last evening, in which we wondered if the disciplinary provisions in Robert's Rules of Order would be sufficient, and we decided that that was primarily order for actions during a meeting in which the chair of any committee adopting Robert's Rules would have disciplinary authority over membership during a meeting. But it did not actually affect post-event decisions. We looked at especially the House Ethics Rule, which we might adopt some of that language, which deals with ethics violations by the state legislature and House members regarding discrimination for race, creed, color, gender, etc. We're going to adopt, we decided in a 3-0 vote to adopt language similar to that. So if you have no questions, I'm going to make a motion to that effect this evening and ask the council to send it back to committee for an actual language to be written. Any questions?
Any questions from the councilors?
Do any of the other members want to say anything before I go to a motion?
Any comment from any of the councilors?
Okay. Then I move that the city council adopt an ethics rule to be written by the Rules and Government Relations Committee, which shall govern the proper conduct and discourse of council members.
Second? Do you have a second?
Second.
No, you have a second. We have a motion on the table for the aforementioned item for Rules Committee to craft an ethics rule. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any abstentions or objections? Hearing none, the motion passes.
I will
Councilor Rist?
seek to set a meeting. Unfortunately, we did not do that prior to the meeting, so I can't announce it. But I hope to set a meeting prior to our next meeting with the members. Thank you. That's all, sir.
Thank you. Councilor Hagan, Finance.
At this point, I will say there's one item that I'd like to request a public hearing, and that's the $25,000 supplemental appropriation, continue the update of the city water meters, and I'll put that in the form of a motion.
Second.
We have a motion that's been made and seconded to set a public hearing for the supplemental appropriation of $25,000 to continue the update of the city water meters. Any further discussion on the motion?
Next meeting.
That would be the next meeting, the 28th.
Okay.
Excuse me, it's the
Okay.
21st, I believe. 21st.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no abstentions, no objections, motion passes.
Also, the next meeting of the Finance Subcommittee will be March 14th at 6 PM in Room 1. I will have more items in the new business section, but at that point, that's it for finance.
Thank you. Now, we still have some time. Councilor Winnie, Public Safety?
Yes, both reports will be made during the public hearing, Mr. President, for public safety.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Winnie, appointments?
Yep. The appointment subcommittee met on, hold on, let me find my notes here. February 1st. And, no, it's, yeah, March 1st, I'm sorry, thank you. February and March, they're all moving into each other. We met and we discussed 2 appointments. We had all 3 members there. The first appointment was with Jessica Jo Allen, who the mayor has requested appointment to as our new city planner. We met with Jessica. We asked her a few really good questions regarding the where her vision was for Easthampton, and the committee came out with a 3-0 positive that we go forward with her appointment for the new city planner. So I will make the motion, and I'm going to do the motion separately because I think that the city planner motion, if anybody has any questions or whatever, can ask us or whatever. So I will make the motion that we appoint Jessica Jo Allen as our city planner with her term of expiration as March 5th, 2015.
Second. Okay, we have a motion on the table to recommend approval of the appointment of Jessica Jo Allen as our new city planner. Any further discussion on this motion?
Just one comment.
Councilor Hagan?
I did attend that hearing. I was, it was right after a public safety meeting, so I did stay for that particular thing, and I just wanted to say I found her very thorough, and I think she'll make a great city planner.
Thank you very much. Any further comments on the motion?
I will make one more. We found her to be very enthusiastic. She has a lot of really good, fresh ideas, and she's willing to take on Stuart's office.
There you go.
There you go. So,
Okay.
yeah. We're
Any,
very excited.
Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
No abstentions or objections? The motion passes.
Thank you. Our second mayoral appointment was for Alexis Breitneicher? No, Breitneicher?
I believe that's correct.
Pretty close. For the CPA committee, with the term of expiration of December 31st, 2014. Looking over at the letter that the gentleman sent to, to the mayor, was very, the woman, yes, I'm sorry. Her resume was exemplary, so we voted 3-0 to go forward with the appointment for the CPA committee with them as a mayoral appointment. So I'll make that in the form of a motion that we appoint Alexis Breitneicher to CPA committee as a mayoral appointment with a term of expiration of December 31st, 2014.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to recommend, you're gonna do this to me too, aren't you? Alexis Breitneicher to the CPA committee. Is there any further comment on the motion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
No abstentions, no objections, motion passes.
Thank you. That is the end of my report for appointments.
Okay, that said, ordinance, Counselor Ziegler.
No report.
We have one item under public hearing, and we have no further report at this time.
Okay. We do have a couple minutes before time left. Would Counselor Hagan like to move property, excuse me? We do have property committee.
Make it short and
Counselor
sweet.
Psychowski?
No report.
No report. Okay, Counselor Hagan, you wanna?
Sure. Under new business, I'd like to do a first reading on, I'll read them all at once, and then request that they, I'll make a motion to move them to finance.
We got a new one tonight, too.
Yes, I
Yes,
got that
he's
one,
aware
yeah,
of
thank you. The first is an interdepartmental transfer dated February 22nd, 2012. Request is hereby made to approve the following appropriation. Requested amount $200 to be transferred from the reserve fund to be transferred to the Council on Aging Longevity Fund. It would be for the following purpose, to fund an unearned payment not included within the budget. It's signed by all the department heads and the mayor. Second is a interdepartmental transfer dated February 22nd. Again, this one is the requested the amount of $10,000 to be transferred from the reserve fund and the amount of $10,000 to be transferred to the Medicare tax account in the amount of $10,000. The requested purpose of this is to offset a shortfall in the municipal Medicaid taxes signed by the mayor and the department head. Third interdepartmental transfer is February 22nd, 2012. The request is following appropriation. Amount requested $30,000 to be transferred from the reserve fund in the amount of $30,000 transferred to the fire overtime fund in that same amount, $30,000. The purpose of this funding is to supplement the fire department overtime budget signed by the mayor and the department head. And I believe there's a new one that's not on the agenda, but it's another interdepartmental transfer dated March 5th. The request is made for the following appropriation, request of $1,300 to be transferred from the fire department medical holdover account to the fire department vehicle repair account. The requested funding is for the following purpose, to provide funds for parts for engine number 2, signed by the mayor and the department head. One final, let me just start with those interdepartmental transfers. I'll make in the form of a motion that we move 1, 2, 3, 4, past 4 interdepartmental transfers to the finance.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to move the aforementioned 4 interdepartmental transfers to finance for review. All those in favor?
Aye.
No abstentions, no objections, motion passes. I'll let you continue.
Yep, my final item, which I'll also make in the form of a motion, is we have a supplemental appropriation request dated February 22nd. Hereby made to approve the following appropriation. The amount requested is $111,000. It's to be appropriated from free cash and be appropriated to the following: police overtime in the amount of $96,000 and police incentive in the amount of $15,000. The request is for the following purpose: to supplement the police department overtime and incentive budget, signed by the mayor and the department head. I would, yes, in form of a motion, I'd request that that item also be forwarded to the finance subcommittee.
Any second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Is that a second? Okay, we have a motion on the table to recommend a supplemental appropriation request for $111,000 to supplement the police department overtime and incentive budget. Any further comment on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. That should conclude that. I'd entertain a motion to enter into public hearing, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to enter into public hearing. Any comments on this motion? Hearing none, the public hearing is open. Councilor Ziegler, I guess you were up first.
Well, the first, we have a general ordinance amendment to propose green auto emissions. At this time, the ordinance outlines that we keep an inventory of all the non-exempt vehicles and a plan for replacing the vehicles to meet the current minimum fuel efficiency ratings as provided through the Mass Department of Energy Resources, Green Communities Divisions, and the fuel efficiency ratings by the U.S. Department of Environmental Protection Agency. At this time, I'd like to move that the general ordinance be open.
We can't put a
Oh,
motion
sorry.
on the table yet.
You're right.
We have to have a public speak time.
Okay,
Right. So,
with that said, what I'd like to do is open this up for public comment. If there's anybody in the audience who'd like to come up and comment about this ordinance for fuel efficiency vehicles, please step forward, state your name and address. Okay, hearing none. Councilor Ziegler, you have the floor.
at this time, because the chair of the ordinance committee, Councilor Derby, isn't present, and he has some things he'd like to say on this, I'd like to move that we leave this open for public hearing.
Continue the public.
Continue the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the table
To the next meeting.
continue this public hearing to the next city council meeting. Any comment on this motion?
21st.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing on this item is continued to the next meeting. Councilor Winnie, you have the floor.
Yes, I do, thank you. The first public hearing that we're holding tonight is to amend the traffic rules and orders, section 1-24, parking prohibited in certain streets at all times on Ferry Street, by adding the following language: Ferry Street southerly side for a distance of 71 feet in an easterly direction starting from a point 143 feet from the intersection of Pepin Avenue. We met twice, the Public Safety Committee met twice about the no parking on Ferry Street. We met with Sergeant Nickel and a resident who was finding it very difficult to get in and out of her driveway because of people parking on her side of the road very close to her driveway, so that it was making it almost virtually impossible for her to back out onto Ferry Street. It was making a very unsafe situation. So Sergeant Nickel went down and he measured off the footage for the language that we are using tonight. We met a second time on February 29th, and the resident is happy with the language, is happy with the proposal for the no parking signs. The chief was there, and so was our city engineer, Mr. Gracia, and all were concurred that this would help remedy her situation and the safety issue for her to get in and out of her driveway. So the committee voted 3-0 to go forth with the no parkings signs to be put up between 94 and 104 Ferry Street.
Okay. At
Anybody
this
has
point,
any
if there's any
questions?
members of the audience who'd like to come forward to address the city council on this issue, please step up to the podium, state your name and address.
Frances Prusno from 104 Ferry Street, and it's me trying to get in and out. I've been there 30 years and never had this kind of a problem, and I'm just afraid that my husband or I or company is gonna get nailed one of these times, because we have the curve coming around this side, and then can't see to get out on the other side. And on Ferry Street, they go 90 miles an hour. So, hopefully you'll let the signs go up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just a footnote, we do have a diagram that you got tonight for where the signs would go, and how Sergeant Nickel and Jim Gracia and everybody kind of outlined it, so.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to step forward to speak to this issue? Please state your name and address. For the record?
Dave Strong, 28 Pepin Avenue. First of all, I'd like to say I think this is a good idea, and I would be in favor of it, but I did have a question, and that is the cars that have been parking there, why and where are they coming from? Where are the people going? Do we have any idea?
Is that something
know?
you-
It's under our understanding from the police department that there is a very large apartment residence across the street from, right, and they have a lot of company that,
All over the country.
that seem to like to park
Right across
on the other
street.
side of the road, correct.
Where are they going to park now?
They can legally park on the side where the apartments are
On that
now,
side.
and, or in the driveway where the property owner of the tenancy has. So, they're just gonna be excluded from parking from the footage from her driveway, so that she can safely get in and out.
Just to clarify, as a member of the Public Safety Committee also, all we did is we are having signage for 1/3 of that area. The 2/3, they'll still be able to park. It was a compromise, so we left the 1/3 near the resident's driveway, so she would have, because it was a very dangerous situation, a safe zone to back out of her driveway, but we did leave 140
Yeah.
some odd feet that they still can park. I mean, obviously, it's gonna limit a car or two that can park there, but there was a compromise. They still will be able to park some vehicles.
It's enough to give her some sight lines, so she can actually get in and out without having something parked there, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I can't help but try to kind of think this through as to where, if they can't park on that side, it's going to put them on the other side of the street or in the driveway, and I'm assuming the driveway isn't big enough to handle too many cars. So it's going to put them on the street, on the other side of the street where you've got a curb. Is that going to create a safety hazard?
Police department
With them
didn't
there.
seem to think so.
No, I again, can't speak for the police because they're not here tonight, but it was my understanding that they said if they start parking there, they would judge it. If they deem it a road hazard, there is no parking there, but if they deem it a road hazard, then they could deal with it, because it would be
I'm thinking you
further
might-
out into the road, because where they park now, they do get off.
They get off,
They
and
do
there's
get
a
off.
curb
the
on
road,
that
so,
side, yeah.
The
That's
police
part
department
of-
was aware of that. They said while they couldn't prohibit them to park there, that if they felt it was a road hazard, that they would deal with the situation as it arose.
That's part of why I was questioning, is I know there's a curb on that side of the road, so they're not gonna be able to get off the road at all, so I think they're probably gonna be back again shortly after this happens, but just wanted to get a clarification on a couple of those items, and by all means, I would certainly support this.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the audience who would like to come up and speak to the council on this issue? Seeing none, Council Winnie?
Okay, I make the motion that we amend traffic rules and orders, section 1-24, parking prohibited in certain streets at all times on Ferry Street by adding the following: Ferry Street, southerly side, for a distance of 71 feet in the easterly direction, starting from a point 143 feet from the intersection of Pepin Avenue.
Second?
We have a motion on the table for the aforementioned amendment of the traffic rules and order concerning installation of some parking sign, no parking signs on Ferry Street. Is there any further comment on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Hearing none, motion passes. Again, Counselor Winnie,
Yes, thank you.
you have the floor.
Public Safety also met after our Ferry Street issue to review the parking issues on Chapin Street. We had very strong neighborhood presence. Chief McMahon was there, as was Jim Gracia, our city engineer. We had Jim there so that we could clarify possession of Chapin Avenue as to who really owned it, because that always seemed to be the mantra of all of our meetings is where do we own, how far do we own, and so forth. We were told at the meeting that Chapin Street does indeed belong to the city of Easthampton. It is an accepted road. So we went forward with speaking to the neighbors and listening to their complaints and all of the issues that are going on up at Chapin Street. It seems that people are now parking up at the end of Chapin Street. There's this like a little man-made cul-de-sac up at the end of Chapin Street, and people are parking up there and they're racing up and down the street, were some of the complaints that we heard. They're walking on private property, they're destroying some private property, all to use that as to get up to the reservation road. So after much discussion and suggestions from the city engineer, the city council made the motion to install no parking signs at the end of the street, stating no parking beyond this point. All the neighbors were in agreement. The only thing that I need to ask tonight is that this public hearing be continued to March 21st, because we're waiting for the language to come from the city engineer as to the footage from the power lines, because we want to
craft the motion.
craft the motion with the footage and the easterly and all of the technical piece of it. So Mr. Gracia was going to work on that, so we ask that we continue the public hearing till March 21st.
Before you state that in the form of motion, is there anyone here in the public who would like to come forward to the podium and speak to the council on this issue? Please step forward, state your name and address. Hearing none, Council Winnie?
Okay, I make a motion that we continue the amend traffic rules and orders for section 1-24, parking prohibited in certain streets at all times on Chapin Street till March 21st.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to continue the public hearing on the amendment for traffic rules and orders, section 124, Chapin Street, to the next city council meeting. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Council Winnie?
Our next public safety meeting, the chair was not able to make before he left town, so it will be posted and we will contact the neighbors when that date will be for the
Okay,
next
thank
public safety meeting.
Okay, any further comment on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or objections? Hearing none, the public hearing is continued. The next item, Councilor Hagan, you are up.
Yeah, the final public hearing tonight is a proposal to rescind a vote approved by the city council on October 6, 2010, in the amount of $200,000 from the CPA Housing Fund to provide for long-term affordable housing at 69 Parsons Street. We had two subcommittee meetings on this in which all parties were given the opportunity to speak, and everyone had their opportunity to speak from both sides of the issue. It did come out of the subcommittee on a one-to-one vote, so there is no recommendation, either positive or negative, coming to the council tonight. Councilor Cobb was not able to attend that meeting. At this time, I would hold any comments I have until after the members of the public have spoken. I don't know if Councilor Rist or Councilor Cobb would like to say anything prior to the public speaking. I'll leave that.
I'll wait, thank you. Yeah, I'll wait.
Okay, all on that, we'll wait till the public has their opportunity. That said, this is a public hearing. If there are any members in the audience who would like to come forward to speak to the council on this particular issue, the motion to rescind, excuse me. Yes, you can go first. I was just- Ed Kuhn, second. Please come to the podium and state your name and address and to the council. Ed, you're second.
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
Valley
Good
GIC.
evening. My name is Felicity Hardy. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Bulkley Richardson in Springfield. I represent Valley Community Development Corporation, which was the grantee of the CPA appropriation, which is the subject of your motion to rescind tonight. As the members of the City Council are aware, on October 6, 2010, the City Council, on the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, voted to appropriate $200,000 of CPA money for an affordable housing project proposed by my client, Valley CDC, to be constructed at 69 Parsons Street. And the City Council approved that appropriation. And the only condition with respect to the appropriation was that it would be for the development of affordable housing at that location. Valley CDC then applied for a special permit. The project qualified for both a special permit under a revised Easthampton zoning ordinance and a comprehensive permit under General Laws Chapter 40B. But at that time, the organization decided to move ahead with a special permit. That special permit has been denied, and now that matter is on appeal with the Land Court. Valley CDC has now filed for a comprehensive permit with the Easthampton Zoning Board of Appeals, immediately after the application for the comprehensive permit, the City Council undertook the consideration of this motion to rescind the CPA money. I'm going to be brief tonight. I know there are a lot of people who feel passionately about the issue, and I am going to just simply indicate to the City Council that there's no basis for the motion to rescind, and I strongly urge the members of the City Council to vote no with respect to the motion to rescind. This project is essentially the same project that was described back in 2010 when Valley CDC applied for the CPA funds that are at issue tonight. The project was described in its response to an RFP that had been promulgated by the Easthampton Housing Partnership. The Housing Partnership was actually looking for developers to make proposals to the city to develop affordable housing in the city, there being an identified need for that kind of housing here in Easthampton. And the project that was proposed at that time was for 32 to 45 units of affordable rental housing. And that was what was described, and that is what is going to be developed by Valley CDC. My understanding of the rationale with respect to the rescission is that perhaps there's been some change in the project, but in fact there's been no change in the project as it was described back in 2010. It is true that the permitting has been delayed, in part because of the opposition of many of the abutters to the project, but the Easthampton Housing Partnership, the Easthampton Housing Authority, the mayor, the state of Massachusetts, the Community Preservation Committee all support this project. And what is really critical, I think, for the City Council's consideration is that the CPA grant and the appropriation that was voted on in 2010 did not condition the funds on the type of permit that the Valley CDC would seek. All the appropriation did was to condition it on the development of affordable housing at 69 Parsons Street, and that is precisely what my client intends to do. After the appropriation was made, Valley CDC and its lender relied on that appropriation in moving forward with a pre-development loan. Valley CDC's lender, Community Economic Development Assistance Corporation, sought assurances from Valley CDC about what the sources of financing were going to be for this project. And we relied on that appropriation in applying for those funds. And in fact, that appropriation is part of our application to CDAC and is in fact part of the loan agreement with CDAC. Councilor Hagan asked me if I would share the loan agreement with City Council. I've done that. Hopefully he's had an opportunity to take a look and to confirm essentially what I said in my correspondence to the City Council, that the CPA money is identified as a source of funds for our going forward, and it is a representation, a material representation we made to CDAC when we sought those funds. CDAC granted us the loan, and on the basis, on the strength of that and what we understood to be the interest in the city of Easthampton for developing this kind of housing, we've spent thousands of dollars in pre-development money on consultants and experts and all the kinds of third-party expenses that are required for a project like this to go forward.
I'm just going to interrupt. I'm going to ask you to try to find a way to start winding down. We have a lot of people that do want to speak. I want to give everybody a fair chance.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Case law in this situation is pretty clear that if a party has relied on an appropriation, the appropriation is not appropriate to have the appropriation rescinded. And because this issue came up in the Finance Committee, I thought it would be appropriate for me to just flag another issue that has been discussed, and that is the question of the type of permit that we sought. Originally Valley CDC sought a special permit under General Laws Chapter 40A, and now we're seeking a comprehensive permit under General Laws Chapter 40B. The city's own attorney has said that that is not a basis for rescinding the money. In his correspondence to the City Council dated February 8, 2012, the city's attorney says that the fact that the current application is under Chapter 40B rather than Chapter 40A is a question of process rather than substance. This alone will not justify a vote to rescind the appropriation. Let me just say one other thing, and that is that we understand that there is significant opposition by a group of abutters to this project. But the best way for those issues to be resolved is through the permitting process. The City Council made a promise to Valley CDC in 2010, and that promise was that the city was appropriating this CPA money, totally appropriate appropriation, and we relied on that in moving ahead. If the City Council were to rescind the vote of that appropriation now, that will likely not go unchallenged, and we strongly urge the City Council at this point to vote no on the motion to rescind. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'm here in the audience.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please state your name and address, please.
Edwin Quinn, 4 Cranberry Lane. At the time, I was the chairman of the CPA when this was submitted to the City Council. There's the paperwork right here. And, there are 2 items. On the front sheet, it says to provide funding for long-term affordable housing at 69 Parsons Street. There is an attachment by Stuart Beckley to that sent to the City Council, and that says $200,000 for the construction and pre-development costs of affordable housing at 69 Parsons Street in order to secure a long-term affordable housing restriction. There's nothing very specific about this. There's no 41, 40A or 40B or anything like that. And as the appeal has already been filed by the Valley CDC on the Planning Board's rejection of this project. So the status of this project still hasn't been resolved. So if you rescind this and they get that permit, I would think that would put the city in a very bad place. The rescission of this $200,000 might also affect future CPA grants. We may give Easthampton bad reputation, which if they do this, they deserve. So I think it's an act of bad faith to do this. Both the city solicitor memo and the Valley CDC memo from the lawyer that was just preceded me cast some doubt on the legality of this rescission. And that also would imply there might be, if we lost that case, it would not only cost $200,000, but maybe, I'm an engineer, not a lawyer, maybe there'd be penalties involved, so it might cost the city a good sum of money. I live in this city, I don't want to see taxes increases by doing something foolish. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had a couple members we've had a couple members to speak in opposition. If there's anyone who'd like to speak in favor of the motion, I'd like them to come forward, try to balance it off. Please state your name and address for the council.
My name is Mary Westervelt, 18 Pepin Avenue, and I'm in favor of this motion. And it is because of the specific intent of the CPA funds to support 3 goals. One is affordable housing, which is an acknowledged need. The second is to preserve open space. And the third is for historical preservation. When the applicant submitted for the CPA funds, the allocation process, through that allocation process, they did not indicate their intent to use open space without setting aside open space. And to me, it is a perversion of the CPA intention to use open space without setting aside open space as is required by our zoning ordinance. And so when the applicant came forward in the special permit process and now in the 40B process, it is the same application and it has the same problem, which is that we're going to be eating up open space. There isn't a lot in our neighborhood, and we're not going to be setting aside additional open space. It's required by our zoning ordinance. It's an intention of our CPA status, and it's a violation of this permit. So to give this funding to the applicant to ultimately undermine a second goal of the CPA funds is in some ways an insult to the citizens of Easthampton that voted to be a CPA community with the intention of preserving open space. And I would submit that it is an act of bad faith to request CPA funds and then turn around and use them in a way that would undermine CPA goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Just because I enjoy saying this, Counselor, please step forward.
He's back. Council President. And Robert Harrison, 31 Ashley Circle, and a long-term member of the CPA committee, current chair. Like Mr. Quinn, we've been involved with CPA since the very first dollar was ever spent back in 2004. I'm speaking in opposition to the original motion as presented by my very good friend, Council President Cobb. And fortunately, we've had many opportunities to discuss it. And I've actually brought notes, so I'll be super brief. Some of them were already spoken by Mr. Quinn. So, but the CPA, I've got a little different take on here I really want you to listen to. The CPA committee, we're not the planning board. We are not the zoning board of appeals. We are not a court or any kind of a judicial function whatsoever. What we do is we evaluate and recommend potential projects that CPA tax dollars are eligible for. That's what our goal is. The proposal by Valley CDC, it fit the bill. It is an eligible project. There's no question about that whatsoever. What I'm asking you to do is not treat the CPA as some pawn in a quest to derail Valley CDC or any other reasoning that some folks may have in opposition to this project on Parsons Street. The CPA committee and what we do not want to be treated as a pawn in this matter. I feel it's in the wrong form, as I've stated from day one. You should know also that, and I've stated this to Councilor Hagan and Cobb, if Valley CDC had approached the committee, and only speaking for myself, and they came in originally as a 40B. There would probably be no difference in the way I would vote, because we're looking at it as an eligible project that is trying to create new housing in this city. We've been unable to attract any dollars to create new housing. All of our housing dollars have been used for rehabs or helping the housing authority, with ramps and things like that. So creating new housing was something that you want us to do and you want us to think about and discuss. If it was a 40B, I would have voted no difference. The fact that it's 40B means nothing to me now or in the future. Now that's our mission. It's one of our goals, and it's one of the restrictive uses of CPA funds, and it's why you count on us. You count on the CPA committee to make this recommendation, bring it to council, and 100% of the time, the city council has approved every recommendation we've made over the last 8 years. And one reminder, no funds would ever leave the city, no CPA funds would ever leave the city unless any project is completely, fully packaged, approved, permitted, full funding, whatever. So no funds are ever at risk, and funds are not at risk right now. None of these funds are at risk since the project has not been decided yet. So I appeal to you one last time. Please don't use CPA in this manner. It's not deserved of us. Let the proper systems in place take care of this. That's why we have a ZBA. It's involved in ZBA right now. That's why we have Mass General Law 40B. That is why that exists. That's why you have an independent judicial system in the courts. It's not for CPA. I really believe that CPA is not what should be on the table, and I urge all of you to consider rescinding the vote. I fully respect, as Councilor Cobb knows, why he made the proposal, and he understands why I'm quite against it, and I hope you'll give that a lot of thought. Other things are going to take place. Why use CPA to have anything to do with trying to take care of this project decision? So, thank you for your time, councilors. I appreciate it.
If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of the motion, please step forward, state your name. Name and address for the council, please.
Yeah. Doug Niedzwecki, 18 Federal Street.
At the podium so we can actually hear it.
Okay. Doug Niedzwecki, 18 Federal Street. I would like to see the funds rescinded because I believe, and many people do believe, that this project has changed and it's become quite unfriendly. You can tell, and you have my notes in front of you. I gave them to you all on Monday. And they're pretty lengthy. I'll just try to put them in a nutshell here. We hear repeatedly from the applicant that things are uneconomic, and yet that hasn't been challenged at all by any of our boards. And you guys have a right to see the hard facts and figures about why anything is uneconomic, and we haven't seen that yet. One of the things they want, all these, I think there are about 10 waivers that they want. One is to have, excuse me, the accessory building be actually 16 feet 9 inches tall, which is higher than the 10 or 12 feet that is allowed. That puts a tall building abutting the neighbors and gives them an eyesore. Mary talked about the, let me check my notes here, the open space. And one of the waivers they're asking for is that they not be accountable to keeping the open space in their project. They want that waived. They used this as a huge selling point earlier. We're going to have 50% open space. They touted that. They boasted about it. Now they want to waive that. They want to waive the dense visual screening because it, quote, doesn't fit their plan. Well, this whole project doesn't fit our plan either. It's just too arbitrary on their part to say we want this and this and this and not set any reasons for it. They want to waive, excuse me, the authority of the planning board to determine the number, size, and characteristics, and that's quoted, of the project. They should not be above law to that degree. So this project has changed immensely to an unfriendly project. So we need evidence that things are not economic. For instance, if there can be fewer apartments in that area, in that housing project, you need to see the facts that it's not economic. They just can't say it's not economic. And I want to correct something that was said. It's not just the abutters who oppose the project. I don't abut it. My wife doesn't abut it. A number of us don't abut this housing project, and we're still against it. They've asked that the, excuse me, the setback requirement be moved from 50 feet to 30 feet. That allows this huge building of 7 units to be put even closer to the street. They want to put the buildings closer together. They want to waive that, that side setback to put buildings closer together, and yet to have windows in those buildings, which could really be a fire hazard. It also puts all these buildings closer to the people who do abut it, and it's really an affront to them. Okay, you know what, I'll just take a seat, let someone else speak, and come back up if what I'm going to say isn't covered. I'll come back up, if that's okay.
I'll permit it. Is there anyone else? Jim, please.
He's in favor.
Please state your name and address.
Jim Sullivan, 35 Main Street here in town. I'm against the proposal, and one of the things I want you to think about is the unintended consequences should this pass. DHCD is a source of grants to the community of Easthampton that provides them discretionary grants. DHCD is strongly in favor of this project. DHCD, in their grant project or in their grant process, allows the community to comment on the appropriateness of whether, say, Easthampton should receive a grant from DHCD. I think you could be sabotaging the city's ability to get future grants from the DHCD, which, you know, is a cutting off your nose to spite your face decision. So I urge you to not take this reckless action. Thank you.
Please. Please state your name and address for the council.
Hi, Kirsten Mora, 12 Federal Street. I don't think the issue here is really 40A or 40B. I think it's an eligible project versus a good project. So yes, this project on its face may be eligible for what were very wide parameters presented by the Housing Authority. And I think as these 2 years have progressed, which I'm sure is unprecedented in many of these cases, we've gained a lot more in-depth knowledge about the project. And I realize that the Valley CDC has stated, you know, there's support from the mayor, there's support from the town, but there is not support from the neighborhood. And I think that's worth considering. So again, I think it's an eligible project versus a good project. Is this a good use of our CPA funds? And I also feel like to take thinly veiled or not even thinly veiled threats, that this will hurt us going forward, whether the Valley CDC chooses to sue or whether the DHCD chooses to not award us any monies going forward. That's the future. We can't predict that. We're dealing with the here and now. And so I think I'm asking that you think about what are we dealing with here and now, and how do I feel about that, and vote accordingly. And then to add to that, I believe it's been stated that the mayor can override whatever you decide anyway. So I think that kind of takes some of those threats off the table. But again, I would like to say, is this really a good project for our CPA funds when it does in fact ask you to disregard the open space in order to meet another goal of the CPA funds? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the audience? Please step forward. State your name and address for the council, please.
Amy Heflin, 10 Pepin Avenue. I agree with, first of all, I support the funds being rescinded. And I agree with actually Kirsten Moore, who just spoke, and with Mary about the open space issue, which is huge. If you go across anywhere in this state and you see high-density housing and you see a lack of open space, you're going to see an area that's really hurting. You're going to see an area that's really hurting for kids, for families. the local economy, and we don't want to set that kind of precedent. The open space waiver's huge, among 10 waivers. So my question to the city council is this. When you allocated this $200,000, did you do so thinking that the $200,000 would go to a housing project with 10 waivers, one of them being able to brush aside open space? And in regard to comments that have been made preceding my speaking about, quote, the best way to resolve is through permitting, I just would like to politely say that we can agree to disagree, because the neighborhood in force and in unity wholly and vehemently disagrees with that statement. I agree with Kirsten Moore, who just spoke, saying that there were, quote, veiled threats to the city made tonight. Things said like, this will not go unchallenged. So what is the city to do? I mean, you're a group that has seen a group before you turn this housing project down for very good reasons. And actually, the applicant's assertion that it hasn't changed, that's very telling. Again, it's not really mentioned very much by the applicant. The planning board turned this down, okay? So as far as the CPA funds being some sort of pawn, I completely disagree with that. That is not what this is about. This is about the neighborhood, the city, what's best for us all, where these funds should be allocated, what's right. This is not about political jockeying or anything like that. It's about many, many, many residents, I would say more than 100, more than 200, more than 300, who would like to see tax dollars put to best use in our city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I'd like to actually have someone who is in opposition to this motion speak. So if there's anybody, please step forward. Trying just to balance out the discussion. State your name and address, please.
Clara Great, 55 Clark Street, and I'd like to say that I am in opposition of this motion to rescind the CPA funds. I think just to comment about what someone said earlier from the CPA committee itself, you know, we have different processes that look at projects from different points of view. The CPA did their work. It was satisfactory to the city council. They followed the regulations. They followed the, you know, the steps that they needed to do. And I think the city council looked at that time and agreed and made an affirmative vote. And I think that that should be honored. You know, if we start rescinding decisions that committees who follow the rules as they're supposed to, it can create havoc for future property owners and developers wondering, you know, will something stick, will something not? As far as, you know, other people who've made comments about other aspects of the project, there are processes for that. The planning board went through their process, the ZBA will go through their process. There'll be plenty of opportunities to flush out whether this is a good project, whether this is a feasible project, whether this is suitable for the community. And I think that those processes should also be followed, and the committees and the boards that oversee that will do their due diligence, you know, appropriately. And I think we should let those people do their jobs. They're all volunteers. They're trying to do the best that they can, and we have a lot of checks and balances in place. So to sort of go backwards and then say, well, we want to, you know, some people don't like the project for various aspects, that may be true, but let's go through the process, and let's honor that process. So I'm asking the City Council to not support and to oppose this proposal and to let the CPA funds stand as they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the police come step forward? State your name and address for the, I would like to know who your partner is.
This is my sidekick, Amelia, and I'm Erica Flood. I live at 6163 Parsons Street. I've been very vocal. You've probably heard my opinion plenty of times. I would like these funds rescind. And if we're going to talk about process, let's talk about what happened in the process. The special permit process was denied. We talked about everything that was wrong. We talked about what's not working, and it was denied. So if we're going to let process happen, then why are we in court for appeal? They're not accepting the process either. So as in abutter, the number one abutter, I'm ground zero. This is bad. This is not good. I grew up in this community. I want to see this community turn into something even better than it is now. The process isn't working. That's why we're here tonight. If you support this with this funds, you're basically denying the 200 people who signed the petition saying we do not support this. So your 6, 7, 8 votes gets rid of 200. The process is failing. That's why we're here. The permit was denied. Let's just take this off the table once and for all, please. And then we can move forward with a plan that's really going to work for the community, for the future, set a new precedent where we can come together and create as a community, not as a group of wealthy people who are trying to tell us what's good for our community and threaten us. We're being threatened. That doesn't seem like a positive way to move forward to me. So that's why I want these funds rescinded. So we can just start over and figure out what's the best use of that piece of property. How can we provide more affordable housing? It's definitely needed, but let's do it the right way, not under threats, not under negativity. Let's just start from scratch. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council on this issue? Seeing none, Councilor Hagan, I'll let you start.
Just a couple, excuse me, just a couple of issues, and then I'll again hold my opinion till some of the other councilors who haven't heard a lot of the public comments before speak. There have been, and just to point out to the councilors, there has been the opinion by the city solicitor, which I think you all have. There has been the opinion by Attorney Hardy for CDC, which you should all have. Attorney Hardy in her comments made mention of myself and Councilor Rist request to City Solicitor Fitzgibbons again on basically reliance damages and what might be included in the contract, or I shouldn't say the contract, but the loan agreement between CDC and their funder. I didn't hear until yesterday morning, which I did put an addendum, and this is my paraphrase. These are not the exact words of Attorney Fitzgibbons. In fact, I had to pull over to the side of the road because I was driving, and I jotted as fast as I could. But I did leave this. He just made a quick comment. I received a call from Attorney Fitzgibbons in response to the request about the contract language CDC added with its lender. Attorney Fitzgibbons stated that he was reluctant to give a written opinion at this time in case litigation was brought against the city in the future. He did state, however, the following that I could share with the council. He did say that CDC did represent to the lender the approval of funds by the city. He did say that this does, however, not answer the question of total funding, and further does not answer the question of whether they would lose the loan if CPA funds are rescinded. He stated that the loan may not, and again, may not be contingent on city funding, and it is unknown whether there are other sources of funding for the project. And finally, Attorney Fitzgibbons said he is unsure whether, and again, he wouldn't really form an opinion either way, whether CDC would or wouldn't proceed with a suit if the funds were rescinded. Again, he said they were pretty vague comments. Also, going back to the legal opinions, and you've all had, I'm sure, time to read them. While there is some case law, it sounds like the case law here is somewhat limited, and I think there's room for discussion what possible actions CDC could take and couldn't take. Certainly, I'm not an attorney, so I can't give you my legal opinion, but just reading through it, common sense, it seems like it's a little open to interpretation, maybe an interpretation that a judge might have to make. So that said, the only other thing I would say, and again, I'll hold the rest of my opinions till after Councilor Cobb and Councilor Rist, who are also on the committee. One thing Mr. Harrison talked about, and Attorney Hardy said basically that, being a member of the council when this first came up, that there were no conditions. I think, again, Mr. Harrison brought out that there were conditions that before any CPA funding is appropriated, which, or I won't say appropriated, but is actually given to CDC or any other group, that the project has to be fully funded by the group and that the permitting has to be approved. And that's all I want to say. So there is that condition to me, at least in my mind, the way I understood it when it came to the council the first time, that no money would move until such time as there was total permitting and that the project was fully funded. And that said, I'll turn it over to Councilor Cobb or Councilor Rist.
I'm going to exercise my privilege to start. You're going to tap me on the shoulder if I take too much time.
Yeah. I've gotta watch it.
What I have to say here is basically I'm going to read this from my notes. This is what I'm gonna read is basically what I was gonna say at the finance meeting that I was unable to attend due to an urgent family matter. And so I'd like to start by apologizing to all those who came to that meeting to hear my testimony. It was due to that urgent family matter that I was unable to attend, and I'm sorry for that. I am, however, thankful that my fellow committee members decided to bring this forward. And in any event, since this measure was the one that I introduced, we all know where my vote would be. However, we must understand that, for the record, it was a tie vote, and therefore the vote coming forward is a vote of no recommendation to the council from the Finance Committee. I'd like to begin by introducing a small packet of reference material that I have presented tonight to every city councilor. And it has that clip on it, and it has the original application cover on it. Included in this is some of the evidence that I put together that brought me to where we are today. The first item in the packet, of course, is the cover sheet, and from the original application submitted to the CPA committee. The next few pages actually contain excerpts from that application. I didn't include the entire application because it is lengthy, and there's some information that came with the application that did not matter at all. And those were the resumes and those type of things that I didn't feel should be public information anyways. But anyways, as you can see, I've highlighted some of the more important items in yellow to make it easier to actually reference. I would like to direct your attention to the top of third page. The third page in, it's actually page 4 on the bottom, and it's the yellow and basically the 5th bullet down, where it states, and I'll read this for record, release an RFQ to select and hire a project architect. And it says, review Easthampton zoning code with assistance from Valley CD staff to determine if site plan approval should be sought through Easthampton's multifamily zoning code, or, and I key that word, or the Massachusetts Comprehensive Permit Law. That's a key term, or, because they didn't choose and or both. They chose or. And now that's reaffirmed, that position, so I'm making clear that it's not a mistake in what we call attachment C, which is a couple back on their schedule, where you see it twice more, where they use the term or. Now, when it comes to taking people in good faith, I took them in good faith, meaning that they chose the special permit process and did not choose the 40B process. Okay? Now, even though I have opposed this from the beginning, I do take this in good faith because of this, because they are clear that they didn't say and or both, they said or. Okay, so when they filed for the special permit under that our multifamily housing zoning, they again reaffirmed that they chose that part, not 40B, and which links up with other elements that you'll see in this quick packet. This brings me to the second and third documents in your packet. These are the actual minutes from the votes taken at CPA and at City Council. The actual language of the motion is in those minutes, so you'll have an opportunity to read that. And I've also highlighted all those in yellow. I would like to note that in both these documents, you'll see no evidence, no evidence once for all, about a presentation by the applicant concerning 40B, again reaffirming that they were going for a special permit. And you'll also see no discussion, no evidence of any discussion from members of the CPA or members of the City Council concerning 40B, again reaffirming that position. In fact, you look at the minutes of the City Council meeting, a previous council even mentioned, so I know that his vote was partially, in my opinion, partially determined on the fact that certain elements would be working out, and as he said, in a special permit process. Again, no discussion on 40B, all on 40A. Also, in those City Council minutes, is a statement from the applicant where they say they do not need these funds to go forward. So even if we voted no, they do not need these funds. Okay, that's also there also. So in the context of this new application, which I see as a 40B, I see this lack of full and open discussion on the entire matter. in my terms only, as a bait and switch. That is what brought me to this. The fourth document that you'll see is the actual 40B application, well, part of it, that is before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I direct your attention to, in the tables, item 5 in that, which speaks to a conservation restriction, and item 10, which speaks to a affordable housing deed restriction. In my tenure as a city councilor, we have always received something in return for the use of CPA funds, like a conservation or affordable housing deed restriction. The request for these waivers in the 40B application muddles those waters to the point where I don't even know what we're actually getting for our money anymore. That said, I am concerned of this lack of full and open discussion on the matter, and to me, these waivers start to head me towards a red flag, and that red flag is basically the, concerns me is the anti-aid amendment concerning the use of public funds. So when you put this all together, the lack of presentation on any discussion concerning a 40B, the statement from the minutes that they do not need these funds, the choice to pursue a special permit, not a 40B, the request in the current 40B application to waive items that muddle the waters, to me the decision was clear, that the conclusion you must come by is that there has been a significant change, and that we must then, okay, to me the conclusion is clear because a significant change has occurred concerning how we came to this decision. To me, we must vote to rescind, as our elected responsibility and stewardship concerning how CPA funds are appropriated demands this. We must also rescind to empower CPA committees, because the CPA committee did not have the benefit of this full and open discussion. And this not only empowers our CPA committee by rescinding, it also empowers CPA committees across the state, so that these type of bait and switch arguments do not occur, whether they're innocent or whether they're purposeful, that they do not occur, that a full and open discussion does occur, and that the decision is made on the merits of a principle. And in our case, that decision was made on a special permit. That was all the discussion that occurred. The next two items in the packet have already been previously mentioned. These are the legal opinions from our attorney and from the applicant's attorney. And the one from our attorney clearly does indicate that we can and do have within our authority to rescind this appropriation. He does state and suggest a litmus test to consider in the event that our decision is challenged, and he also states that our decision is subject to the veto of the mayor, which I do fully agree with. The final item in this packet, in the very back of the packet, is an aerial view of the site actually taken by one of the non-abutters who oppose this project. I included this in here so people get an idea of what it looks like. And it's smack dab in the middle of that picture. You'll see a large wooded area. That large wooded area is 69 Parsons Street. And what this project does, wipe that out. It'll take all those trees right out. So for now, basically I have taken my time. You didn't tap me on the shoulder. I've taken enough time. I do have a lot more to say, and I'm going to reserve my right to actually speak twice and speak last on this issue. And I'll open the floor to Councilor Rist if you would like to speak next.
Certainly. Well, I would like to loudly state in opposition to this that we must not rescind as much as you feel we must. I believe there are consequences of actions. We cannot just do something today without realizing what these consequences are. Rescission will lead the city to a costly legal battle. It is their right to fight this in court. In fact, they already are doing that. Not only the extensive attorney and court costs that will be charged to the taxpayer to defend a difficult to defend action, but there's a very real possibility of the taxpayers being responsible for hundreds and thousands of dollars in penalties and reparations to the Valley CDC should we lose in court. You don't need to be a legal rocket scientist to read between the lines in our city attorney's opinion, which clearly cautions the council in taking this action. He clearly warns we have a high legal bar to reach in defending this council move. And I cannot caution the council enough It is a legal situation, and it will go to court. And yes, it's a threat, but it's a very real threat. They're already in court on the special permit process. And I think he's clearly stated, in his opinion, that we will probably suffer defeat in court on this action. I really feel that that's what he's stating. But the second and more important reason to me, and I can't emphasize this enough, is the damage this dangerous precedent will set to the CPA committee's ability to fund similar projects in the future. It is real, and it is not just a threat. It is a real situation. Funds typically granted by the CPA are used to leverage grants from grant providers and other agencies. These providers will see this action as reason to limit their funding, or at the very least, place Easthampton on the bottom of the list of competitive projects they fund. And it's not simply affordable housing projects, open space projects, and the like. They would be cautious in granting projects in the future because this action took place and they couldn't trust the city council. It will take years to change grant providers' opinions on this. In this council's opinion, finally, the funding authority, namely the CPA, should be the initiator of any rescission of funding they appropriate. It's just my feeling that, like the mayor, when his actions are taken to rescind funding, it's because he is the authority with regard to setting the budget and funding appropriations. In this case, it's the CPA. In conclusion, and I'm a lot briefer than my other councilors are, in conclusion, it is not in the best interest of the city or its taxpayers to take an action even though it may be legal to do so. It simply is not justifiable or affordable for the city's taxpayers. And we will not win. We will not win in court. I strongly believe that's what Jack Fitzgibbon is telling us. And I'm cautious I'm also very fearful of what it will do to the CPA. Thank you.
Any other members of the council would like to speak to this? Councilor Psychowski?
I've listened to both sides here this evening, and I voted no on the first vote for giving any money, because I'm opposed to that, because for the simple reason, if you've got to come here and get $200,000 from us, they want to look for loans, I'm sorry. The numbers were wrong for the project. It's too dense. We're packing that neighborhood down there now with affordable housing. We're really packing it. It's not right to that neighborhood. Now, one of the big things is when our ex-planner was up there and he was saying, well, this is the way that neighborhood is. Well, most of that neighborhood over in the mill housing was built before zoning. And I know that. I talked to the people. And just because he used that for an excuse to get through, and just because we're being threatened with a lawsuit or quasi-threatened and we don't know where it's going, I think I'm going to vote to rescind that money tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the council would like?
Do we do a motion on the table?
No, we do not have a motion on the floor at this
Wait
time.
until we do a motion on the table.
Okay. There's no other further quick comment. Councilor Hagan, would you like to put a motion?
I sure will.
Have you closed the public hearing?
Well, that,
No, no. you
No,
close it
not
after
yet.
the motion.
I'll make a motion to rescind the appropriation of $200,000 in CPA funds for 69 Parsons Street. In accordance with notice previously given at the last meeting, I move to rescind the October 6, 2010 vote to appropriate $200,000 of CPA funds in support of affordable housing project at 69 Parsons Street.
Please. Any second on the motion?
Second.
We have a motion on the table to recommend the appropriation for $200,000 of CPA funds for 69 Parsons Street be rescinded. That's the motion. You have the language? Okay.
I mean, I don't.
Yeah, you
Okay,
can
we'll
have
get it to you. Okay. That said, now that we have a motion on the table, are there any members who would like to speak to the motion? Councilor Winnie.
I think that our ex-counselor, now chair of the CPA, Counselor Harrison, is absolutely correct. We are not the planning board. We are not the zoning board. We are the legislative body that made the appropriation in 2008 for $200,000 for CPA funds to be used for this project. The project had no 40A, 40C, or 40B attached to it. It was for affordable housing to be at 69 Pleasant Street or Parsons Street. The project itself is under the jurisdiction of the zoning body. It's not under our jurisdiction. And with that being said, let us all remember that the Boyle Corporation has an outstanding special permit issued in '08 for 32 units to go on that property. That special permit is valid until 2014. The proposed density matches what's existing there, and the Boyles have never declared or decided that if their project would to go through, it would be condos or it would be rental. They never made that comment. So, with that being said, something will go in on that property, make no mistake, whether it be under the CPA and the CDC or it be Boyle Corporation, something will go in on that property. Make no mistake. The CDC does not own that property, the Boyle Company. Yeah, everybody seems to forget who owns the property. The Boyles own the property, and the Boyle Corporation will develop it. That's a given. That's what they do. They develop properties. So with that being said, I think that Mr. Harrison makes a very correct statement in saying that for us to rescind the money that the CPA made in good faith and that we voted for in good faith, I think is a wrong thing to do. I really do. So I'm going to vote against the rescission.
Before we begin, and I allow people to speak. Okay, before we begin, excuse me, before we begin, what I would be remiss if I didn't read this. This is a letter submitted by Councilor McCoy on this issue. I said I would read it previously. I'm going to read it now. Dear fellow member of the Easthampton City Council, due to work commitments, I will not be able to attend the meeting of March 7th. As a result, I will miss the vote relating to the request to rescind the $200,000. I would have voted against this request for three main reasons. Firstly, in reading the earlier approved motion, the council agreed to fund an affordable housing project at 69 Parsons Street. The approved motion never mentioned if the project would be a 40A or 40B. In light of the wording of the approved motion, I see no evidence that the project has significantly changed from the original proposed project. Secondly, Attorney Fitzgibbons does refer to the limitation to withdrawing funding if the earlier appropriation would result in financial liability to the group awarded the funds. In my opinion, the Valley CDC has proven that rescinding the funds would result in a financial liability to their corporation. Lastly, I feel rescinding monies appropriated for a project would send a terrible message of instability to future developers interested in being participants in projects in Easthampton that might require municipal financial assistance. I would strongly ask my fellow councilor to vote against the request to rescind the $200,000 CPA funds for the 69 Parsons Street Affordable Housing Project. Sincerely, Joseph McCoy, Easthampton City Council at large. Councilor Psychowski, you have the floor.
The thing of it is, I'm just questioning, how many, with the new rules of the council under the charter changes, we have to have 5 votes affirmative for this to pass or 5 votes and a negative for to fail,
Motion
right?
to rescind with prior notice requires a majority vote. That's 5 votes.
Any motion, may I, Mr. President? Any motion on any measure in the positive requires 5 votes. That is the new charter change we all voted on. So that's the way it goes. Okay.
Okay. Any further, Councilor Hagan?
Sure, I'll go. I've been through 2 subcommittee meetings, which I've heard from both parties, and obviously the full council. I think there's been a lot of information. At this time, it's my opinion that it's no longer really about affordable housing. It's about the process and what the city council approved and what CDC promised in return to receive those funds. As Councilor Cobb said in their application submitted on February of 2010, they did state on page 4 that the Valley CD staff would determine if the planned site approval should be sought through the Easthampton Multiple Family Zoning Code 40A or Chapter 40B. They chose to proceed through the zoning code. Our commitment of the funds was contingent on the CDC obtaining all funding and permits. In my opinion, they failed their commitment when our planning board failed to approve the project. Now they want to change the process to a 40B. This is a much different process. They are looking for many waivers, setbacks, heights, etc. The question has come up as to whether this is an unfriendly 40B. It is obviously that the vast majority of the neighborhood is opposed to for a variety of reasons. Short of a citywide referendum, no one can answer what the citywide sentiment is. However, we do know that the CDC is already suing the planning board, which in my opinion is less than friendly or working with the community. They also, in my opinion, make reference in Attorney Hardy's letter to challenging our decision in the current matter if it is not favorable to them. In my opinion, I do not feel we should approve taxpayer money to an organization that is currently suing the city, and therefore I'll vote to rescind the CPA funding.
Thank you. Any other comment, Counselor?
I was part of that process. I was the planning board member that voted no. And I remember going through those hearings, that as each step went and each meeting went and it got drawn out, more and more came up on this project. And through the whole thing, there were several times that we asked if they would scale it back or change certain things, and they just didn't seem to be that flexible from changing things. And now they're coming back with all the waivers for what they originally had. And I have no problem voting in favor of your motion.
Thank you. Good. Any comments from the other councilors? Councilor Ziegler?
I just, with the dialogue, I mean, we've heard from a lot of the community, and one of the things that I hear over and over again is that we're voting to approve the funds, and I don't see that we're voting to approve the funds as much as we are voting to rescind something that the council had voted for previously in good faith. And I do feel that it is a dangerous precedent, and I also, my interpretation of what we were provided is that the city's legal counsel also feels that it's more of a process change versus a substantial change. So I just wanted to put that out, that I don't feel necessarily that the debate is being phrased that we're voting for the funding as much as it is for rescinding it.
Okay. Any further comment on the motion? I did want to exercise my right to speak last, because I want to speak about some of the significant changes in process that are going on here in a 40B. The first thing to consider when you go from a 40A to a 40B, there is something that you can grab onto that is significant. A 40B, and that's a economic value of all those waivers. That is a number that is significant, and you can grab onto that. And so there has been a significant change since we voted on this in 2010. The case law here, if you read the case law, also speaks to new councilors who weren't on that board at the time that vote was made, and they're not beholden to that vote. So that's something that is also could be considered. I'd like to speak to actually change in process, and I'll give you my opinion on that. I look at a process as a series of steps from point A to point B. And in our case, it was the application for special permit to the, at this point now, the appeal, but the judgment made by the planning board. That's the process. A change in process was, in our case, in my opinion, would have been when they went from 38 to 37 units. You still got a special permit at the end. This is a mutually exclusive, different method. And it's kind of like, the best analogy I could come up with is, because it's a new application, it's a new decision, is that, because what came to mind was my tour of the Camaro plant up in Canada. And when you're in that plant, all they make is Camaros. Their process is making Camaros. Now, if I want to change the process, they bring in a new body for like a convertible or a bigger engine package, but I get a Camaro at the end. If I want a truck, I have to go somewhere entirely different to get that truck, because it's an entirely different process, an entirely different method. And that's what we have here. This is not just a simple change in process. This is something entirely different. This is significant because there's a big economic value in all the waivers that they can, that they possibly could secure. And I'd like to point out one little fact. Here's the precedent we are setting here. The precedent we are setting is 200,000, 38 units. We are giving them, if they are successful in getting a permit, a little over $5,000 per unit to waive our zoning. Is that the precedent we want to set? And so that said, if there's no further comment, and because I also reserve my right to speak last, I'd like to, since we have a motion on the table, I'd like to take a roll call. I'll vote on the motion.
If you want to read it again, just to
Okay,
be clear.
so that we're all clear, the motion states as follows. In accordance with notice previously given at the last meeting, I move to rescind the October 6, 2010 vote to appropriate $200,000 to CPA funds in support of an affordable housing project at 69 Parsons Street. That motion before us has been made and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Justin Cobb.
I vote to approve the rescission.
Donald Psychowski.
Vote to approve the rescind.
Dan Hagan.
I vote yes to rescind.
Chester Ogalevitz.
I vote yes to rescind.
Dan Rist.
No.
Joy Winnie.
No.
Nathan Ziegler.
No.
We have 4 yeses, 3 nos. The motion fails due to lack of 5.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Move the public hearings be closed.
Second.
We have a motion on the table to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, since we have concluded our new business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion on the table to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
I would have taken 5 votes in the old way because it's an appropriation.